But we're going to talk about the presidential elections of the 1910s, as these are happening alongside the idea of the progressive era of imperialism and of World War I. Right, so this is going to tie it all together. Right, so Theodore Roosevelt had been president, and he was an accidental president. Okay, they made him the running mate of William McKinley to kind of sideline him, and then William McKinley was shot, and then Theodore Roosevelt became president, and he also, after becoming president, is reelected. So he serves almost 2 political terms. And so in 1908, Roosevelt steps aside for Taft. And William Jennings Bryan, the progressive hero, becomes a third-time loser for the Democrats. Basically, Bryan wins the South in his home state of Nebraska. That's not what I thought about that. The most interesting, exciting of these is the 1912 presidential election, because it is a 4-way contest in which 4 different candidates are going to get a substantial amount of the vote. So the Democratic nominee is Woodrow Wilson, who is the governor of New Jersey. And so he is a change of direction, because William Jennings Bryan was appealing to the progressive populist angle. And he had lost 3 times. And so Wilson is more of an appeal to the southern base of the Democratic Party at the time. He was born in Virginia while the Civil War was still ongoing. His father was a Christian minister, and his family had slaves because his father got slaves as part of the compensation for him being a pastor. So this kind of warps Wilson's view, and he's going to believe in a lot of progressive policies, the progressive amendments, but he is going to have a view of racial superiority for white people. He is our only president who had a PhD. He's very well educated, so he gets there. So that's a divergence from William Jennings Bryan. The Republican nominee is William Howard Taft. He is the sitting president of the United States. He was Roosevelt's basically handpicked successor, and Roosevelt is terribly disappointed in him. And Roosevelt's going to try to unseat him at the convention, and when that doesn't work, Taft holds on to his position. So Taft does represent the more conservative side of the Republican Party versus the more progressive, but he has continued quite a bit of the trust busting that was done by Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt just did not give him any credit for this. That's the case. Then you have the former president of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, who tries to go get his 3rd term. At this point, 3rd term is completely allowed. However, it's the precedent was just George Washington's 2 terms. It's allowed, so he's going out of order for a 3rd term. He tries to get the Republican nomination. He doesn't get it, but it's close. So he walks out of the convention, and he is the nominee for the Progressive Party. Now, during this time, he gets shot while giving a speech. He gets shot and then continues to give a speech, and he says that he feels as strong as the bull moose. So they're going to call him bull moose. And so this is his divide. He is on the progressive end of his party. And then you have the socialist nominee, Eugene V. Debs, who is the founder of the Industrial Workers of the World. And he is, an actual socialist. He believes in these huge sweeping government programs of universal health care, what will become Social Security. He wants the U.S. to get done with imperialism, isolationist. In this, he wants to break up companies as tax rich. He is further left is these areas there. This is, though, before the Russian Revolution. This is before the Bolsheviks have become the communists in Russia. And so socialism has a lot more pull in the United States. It doesn't have a connotation with communism yet. So the result is a split of the vote. The Republican Party is divided between a conservative and a progressive candidate. So we get a divide. This means that the Democrat Woodrow Wilson can get 41.8% of the vote and win the election. Now, I just said that William Jennings Bryan was a 3-time loser when they ran last time. Well, when it was only a 2-person contest, William Jennings Bryan got 43% of vote for the Democrats. This next election, Woodrow Wilson gets 42%, but then he wins by a wide margin because of the vote split. So you can see the emphasis of the Democrats in the Deep South. Well, they have always uniform support, less than the North, but this is enough. Then you have William Howard Taft, who is going to get 23% of the vote. This is a pretty terrible showing for the sitting president of the United States. Okay, he's only going to win, I believe, 2 states outright. He sits the vote with Roosevelt. In South Dakota, the Republican Party actually just nominates Roosevelt, who's on the ballot. So Taft's not even on the ballot. There. Roosevelt actually gets second place as the progressive bull moose candidate. Right? And in a couple states, he is listed as the Republican. And so, if you add this together, Theodore Roosevelt has 27% of the vote. Taft has 23%. Put that together, that's 50%. And Wilson got 42%. So you consolidate that. One of those 2 candidates would have won. They have bad blood, so likely you would have ended up in a situation where someone would have gone to Wilson. And then you have Eugene V. Debs. As a socialist, he gets nearly 1 million votes. Now, his total vote share is only 6%. There's some places he literally gets no votes, but places where he really appeals are strong mining areas. The Iron Range up in Minnesota. We have silver mining in Nevada. The hotbed of socialism in the United States is Little Dixie in Oklahoma. Now, what this is an expression of, though, is dissatisfaction with the relative conservatism of the 2 other major party candidates, right? That you have a splinter group for the socialists and for the progressives. So the electoral map, how it works at the electoral college, is that if you get the most votes, you win the state. You get all these things. So because there's a split vote, Woodrow Wilson gets 42%, and he wins most of the states. So he is then president. There is the 1916 presidential election. But this is happening in the backdrop of World War I has started, but the United States is not yet a part of it. And so you have Woodrow Wilson running for another term. And then you have the Republicans have consolidated with 1 candidate, an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Charles Evans Hughes, who is trying to do like a middle ground between the progressives and conservatives in his party. So President Woodrow Wilson is easily renominated. And then in the Republican Party, they have Supreme Court Justice Charles Evans Hughes, who then resigns from the Supreme Court to run for president because he doesn't want there to be this tie of politics there. After he loses, he will later be made Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and get back on it. Now, Wilson knows that last time he only won because of the split vote. So the major issue he's going to work for in here is he kept us out of war. Wilson campaigned on the United States staying neutral in the conflict. Right? Which he had. And so it all comes down to California. California is not the big state that it is today. It only has 13 electoral college votes. But it is decided by 4,000 votes. And whoever would win California would have won the electoral college and become president. And the early returns to California seem to favor Charles Evans Hughes, so there's some reporting saying he's going to be the next president. But ultimately, Wilson wins. So, in the popular vote, it's really close. It's 49% to 46%. And electoral college is very close. 277 to 254. There's 13 votes from California. If you flip them, that would have been 267 Republican, 264 for the Democrat. And at that point, you needed the 266, so that would have been just enough. Now, the U.S. is not in the war. Wilson isn't planning on getting in the war, though we will get in the war. However, Wilson has a backup plan. At this point, the president doesn't take office until March, not like January today. So he was afraid if he lost, America would have a lame duck president for 5 months. So his plan was, if he lost, his plan was to appoint Hughes to be Secretary of State. So he'd be in the president. So the order of succession would have been president, vice president, Secretary of State at that point. And then he would have had himself and the vice president resign. This would allow Hughes to become president 5 months early and allowed him to make decisions about the U.S. involvement or lack of involvement in the war. Now, people are going to say that basically Wilson betrayed everyone because the next year the United States will enter World War I. All right, so we saw mountain slides, but I am, putting us a reference point for these presidential elections that are happening while these wider themes and ideas are going down. Hello, class.